I got to go GW yet again. Look, I'm going to keep it short. We already talked about the merits of both of these amazing men and amazing presidents. Abraham Lincoln preserved the Union. George Washington created it. There is no Union without George Washington. So my nod goes to George Washington.
I got to second that, David. I mean, none of the expansions of work that Lincoln was able to embrace and enshrine can happen if the system collapses in the first decade. And so Washington showed us that a new country doesn't need a king or a monarch or an emperor, that they can have a president who is willing to cede power. And so I think that's the biggest thing that George Washington really showed us. And so I have to double down on your vote.
That's right. I have to do the same. Not only is George Washington a number one seed, he was the number one president, and frankly, he invented the league. I think he takes this away in a landslide, and so I got to stick with George on this one.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. Hey Matt, it's the end of March, beginning of April, which means there's a lot of basketball being played as part of March Madness. Have you been keeping up on it? Did you see the end of the Duke-UConn game?
I was going to say, David, I'll warn you going into this that I am not a very big sports guy. I'm the guy, like, when everyone's talking sports, yeah, did you catch this, catch that? I'll nod my head. Definitely, that pass to that field goal and that hoop was amazing. I thought that was fantastic. Anyway, I haven't been keeping up for it, but I do hear we have a really exciting bracket coming up for this show.
We do. March Madness, as usual, has been full of surprises, and hopefully our Defender of Freedom Liberty bracket has as well, that we're going to talk about. I actually am in a pool right now talking about March Madness with my kids and a few of their significant others. So it's been a lot of trash talking on the text line. But the Duke-UConn game over the weekend was pretty phenomenal. Last second shot to knock out a number one seed. That was pretty magical, and we'll see if we have any other theatrics like that coming up in our Liberty Challenge.
I think it'll be exciting. And the Liberty Challenge, this is a bracket that I am really stoked for. Can't wait for it.
It's March Madness time, and Americans for Prosperity decided to have a little fun and put together a Liberty bracket with head-to-head competitions between defenders of freedom. You've got 64 defenders in the mix. Some are founding fathers. Others stood up for big causes. And some helped shape the rule of law we defend on today. It's a chance to look back and remember the folks who fought to keep this country free, and maybe spark a little friendly debate along the way about who is the ultimate defender of freedom. So let's go through this bracket with our three great guests who have all been on here before. First, I want to welcome Hunter Kendrick, who is marketing manager for Americans for Prosperity. Our next guest has the most appearances on the podcast, the University of North Carolina, so to speak, of Americans for Americans Potential, Jeremiah Mosteller, Vice President of Policy, and Daniel Bassali, who is a Vice President of Grassroots Marketing. Welcome, guys. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Very excited to be here, David. This is going to be great.
To be here, David.
Well, I'm excited. But it's a great group to talk to, and you guys, some of you have been executing on this and kind of had the idea for this. So, before we really get into defining who are the best defenders of freedom, Daniel, maybe you can tell us, where did this idea come from, and why did we decide to do this?
Yeah, thanks, David. So this is a product of One Small Step, our initiative to really look back at America's 250th anniversary, leverage this inflection point to look back on our history, celebrate it, and really reflect on those founding principles that make America so special. And as we're engaged in this all year long, one of the critical components of our initiative is to help educate people about these great Americans and what they did to preserve freedom, and really spark debate, as you said, in conversation. So our toolkit website has a lot of great resources. This bracket challenge was a fun way to engage people to really learn something. There's 64 defenders of freedom, so there's probably some you've never heard of, some that you didn't even know that what they did for this country. So really to reflect on all of that and spark the debate. And then honestly, the other piece of it is to then get them to have the conversation with others in a fun, meaningful way. Everyone's filling out brackets. Why don't we fill out a bracket about American history?
Yeah, sounds great to me. I think it's super fun. It's been fun to track and I've learned about. I love history. I love American history, and I've even learned some watching this transpire. Looking back, we're right now at the Eagle 8, and kind of getting down to the wire, and that's what we're going to spend most of our time talking about. But I want to look back a little bit to the original round of 64 and some of the subsequent matchups. There were some tough matchups early. I got a bone to pick with one, though, and maybe I'd love to hear from our guests. But Alexander Hamilton beat out Paul Revere. And, I mean, you get like a really successful Broadway show, and I guess that you get some popular momentum and move forward. But if we're talking about defenders of freedom, I mean, man, Paul Revere is quite a selection. And Alexander Hamilton had a mixed history when it came to absolutely loving liberty and freedom and small government.
Well, David, I have a bone to pick with America as well. The fact that Nathan Hale did not make it out of the first round, I mean, he is the patron saint of one small step and proves that one act of courage can echo for centuries. I mean, he made the pure sacrifice for liberty. And no offense, Edison did great things, but Edison expanded on what free people could build, while Nathan Hale, he represents what people are willing to die for so that freedom can exist in the first place. And so I think we need to roll that back. I think we need to try that again. People need to take another look at their votes on that one.
Well, the masses have spoken. They're not always correct. I mean, there are some tough matchups. So, I mean, Sojourner Truth versus, was it Harriet Tubman? I think was that it? No, I'm sorry.
Closest one we had was
Susan B. Anthony. That's a tough one.
Yeah, it was a tough one. The closest one we had was the one Jeremiah brought up. Thomas Edison was the one who beat out Nathan Hale. So, Jeremiah, you gotta play a fair card here. I mean, Nathan Hale lost, but he lost to Thomas Edison, and I think there's some really good, compelling arguments for why Edison contributed a lot to American innovation, the spirit of entrepreneurship. I mean, the fact that we're even able to have this conversation via the live stream is in some part thanks to Thomas Edison. So, I'm not debating you on that. I know you've got your bone to pick, but America, just by 3 votes, went with Edison. Another close one that I wanted to highlight was Clarence Thomas over Milton Friedman. That one was super tight in the early rounds too. And I did not expect Clarence Thomas to pull that one out. I thought Milton Friedman was going to win. And then I'll pick one more that I'm shocked that the Wright brothers lost in the second round. They lost to Dwight Eisenhower, who then went and then beat out Neil Armstrong in the next round. So he's just taken out all the flight in America. And I don't think we would have even won World War II if it wasn't for the Wright brothers and then our pioneers in flight. But anyway, that's my bone to pick in the matchups in the early rounds.
All right.
Well, I'll say when it comes to Clarence Thomas and Milton Friedman, that's basically the Constitution versus free markets. So we have a libertarian civil war happening right now. And I'm with Jeremiah on the Nathan Hale and Thomas Edison matchup. One guy gave his life for liberty. The other gave us light bulbs. America really picked electricity over liberty. I don't know about that one.
Yeah, one illuminated the way for freedom and liberty. Another just illuminated stuff. All right. Well, let's go to the Eagle 8 round. And there are some really rough matchups here that I have a hard time. So we're going to ask our panel to talk about who they, their thoughts on the matchup and who they would pick. So our first matchup, our 2 presidents, both are from Virginia. America's first president, George Washington, against the 3rd president and the writer of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. I mean, this seems to be like one of those times where 2 potential number 1 seeds or 2 potential champions are facing off in an earlier round.
Yeah, totally. And I brought my Sharpie pen, A250 style. I think you made this one. Big into the brackets here, but to me at least, there's no way you go against GW. I get it. Thomas Jefferson, only 33 years old when he signed and wrote the Declaration of Independence, has the largest personal library that actually started the Library of Congress, became the third president. All really, really significant achievements. And I think had the bracket played out a little bit differently, we might be seeing him in the finals. But he just happens to face George Washington, and there's just no way you go against him. I won't even go through all the points. It should just be an automatic that GW advances.
David, I got to double down on what Daniel's saying. I mean, this is essentially a contrast between poetry and practice. If we think about this as a breakup, Jefferson wrote the breakup text. Washington actually moved out and moved on to a new dating relationship. So, like, I'm sorry, you can't compare the two. And so we got to just call out what's happening here in this matchup. I agree with Daniel, though, that Jefferson beats a lot of other people, but just through pure chance of how this bracket worked out, he's now stuck against the boss that is George Washington.
I don't know. As a Virginian, this is a tough one. This is like the UVA versus VCU matchup, so it's hard to decide. But I think I'm going to have to go against the group on this one. I'm a Jefferson girl at heart. He's one of my favorite presidents. At 33 years old, like Jeremiah said, he wrote the greatest breakup text in the world to the world's biggest superpower. That's crazy. At 33 years old, I was still trying to figure out my skincare routine. He really redefined liberty and government at the start, and it's lasted for 250 years. That's crazy. Without Jefferson, we wouldn't know what limited government was. So that's why I'm going with Jefferson on this one.
Well, I'm glad it's not unanimous because I have really strong feelings on both of these guys. I think either one could win the overall challenge. Like if I was just picking for out of the round of 64, just two people, I might have picked those two. I think they're two of the icons. I mean, they beat John Adams and James Madison respectively in the last rounds, which is just saying something. You know, they're it's really pretty unfortunate that they had to all those four all ran into each other. But I think George Washington's going to move on and probably appropriately so truly the father of the country and a man who could have taken us in a lot of bad directions and really decided to put us on a great path and not only won the revolution, but you really won the establishment of setting up America. So, all right, we're going to move George Washington up.
Sharpie.
Write it in, yeah. All right, so the next one, we have another presidential matchup. 16th President Abraham Lincoln from the great state of Illinois, where I reside at the moment, against the 26th President, Teddy Roosevelt. Both somewhat controversial figures at times when we're talking freedom.
Well, David, I'm going to throw out a fun fact about me because I don't know that your listeners know this. I read a Lincoln book every single year. And I try and rotate between ones that criticize his presidency, ones that celebrate it, ones that are kind of in the middle. I'm from the South, so I'm not convinced that my history education was actually accurate about Lincoln. And so I try and compensate by reading these books. But I do have to say that has kind of complicated this dynamic as I was thinking about the matchups with him, because clearly he did amazing things with ending slavery and keeping our country together. But there was also some actions he took in the course of that war that are pretty severe violations of civil liberties that I'd be happy to spar with any of these other panelists about. But I still think he should win at the end of the day. Like, look, I love a good national park that Roosevelt helped expand, but I'm sorry, he can't compare to Abraham Lincoln.
Look, I'm not going to try to debate Jeremiah on Lincoln, given the fact that he just said he reads a book about Lincoln every single year. Nerd. But what I will say is I think I'm going to have to go Lincoln as well, for all the reasons. But can we just appreciate who Teddy Roosevelt was? Like, he keeps popping up in American history for decades. I mean, whether it's winning in the Spanish-American War, whether it's serving as president, whether it's serving as a figurehead in politics, well, afterwards, of course, he was also the youngest president in U.S. history. He was 42 years old. So again, just kind of showing you that a lot of people can make a significant impact at any point in their lives. The leader of the Rough Riders, I think we just have to appreciate all that Teddy Roosevelt did and the man that he was, because he was a badass.
He really was.
That's right. This is such a close matchup. I think Teddy Roosevelt is what happens when you mix the founding fathers with caffeine and a hunting rifle. He was an absolutely incredible figure. He literally got shot in the middle of a speech and kept going. That is insane. And so I think this is a close matchup, just given Teddy Roosevelt's personality and energy. But at the end of the day, Lincoln has that height. And he's the guy you want when your team is down 20 points in the second half, and he's going to come in clutch to save the game.
You mentioned the hype, but I got to say, this is a Liberty bracket challenge. But if these two were sparring head to head, Roosevelt wins that easily, right? Can we all
That's
just
true.
admit that?
I mean, Lincoln had a reach advantage, and guys raised in the mid-18, the early 1800s kind of were a little scrappier in America than maybe guys who got soft in the early 1900s, but I don't know.
There is nothing soft about Teddy Roosevelt.
There's not.
He may not have the reach, but that man is boxing out for every rebound.
Yeah, all right. I would give you that. I mean, he's probably one of the toughest presidents we could think of. He was one of the youngest, but yeah. And there's so many. It's so funny because Teddy Roosevelt is one of those national presidents. I mean, I go to North Dakota, which is pretty remote, random state, and they are putting a Teddy Roosevelt museum that they're opening up. The Teddy Roosevelt Museum is opening up July 4th weekend this year. They love Teddy Roosevelt. They consider themselves like a Rough Rider state, which seemed really random to me because I had no idea he had a connection there. But he did so much out west with the parks and all that he really transformed the face of America. But when we're talking about the freedom fighters, the folks defending freedom, I think, especially Lincoln, what he did, the Emancipation Proclamation and the way he guided America, it's pretty hard to argue with that. So
yeah,
we're going to go with Honest Abe.
David, I mean, bottom line, if you think of in terms of scale about how many people gained how much liberty, I think Lincoln is very hard to beat in this bracket, generally speaking, but particularly in this matchup.
Yes. All right, now we're moving we're getting a little more modern. Those of us who are a little older than some of the other people, it's actually part of their lifetime. So next we're going to the 40th president, also a favorite son of Illinois. Not everybody gives us credit for it, but President Ronald Reagan versus Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. So this is a heavyweight matchup, particularly for the 80s and then beyond. So what do you guys think? Reagan versus Scalia.
I'll start here again. When you're thinking about a incredible story and really the blueprint, we currently have a president who was a celebrity beforehand. Well, that actually was started with Ronald Reagan, Hollywood actor turned political leader, governor of California, then president, who really gave Americans hope again after those terrible years with Jimmy Carter, took on the Soviet Union, broke the Soviet Union, gave America the optimism that we needed, gave America the end towards the end of the Cold War, and really championed what is now the conservative movement, free markets and free enterprise and free people. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Ronald Reagan, and I just don't see a way, as much as Scalia is the backbone of our judicial system, I just don't see a way that you can go with anyone other than Reagan here.
Yeah, this is a really interesting matchup. You've got the constitutionalist versus the great communicator. But honestly, in this fight, I see Antonin Scalia getting caught up arguing about the rules with the ref. He was an originalist. He wants to talk about the rules and the Constitution. So frankly, I think Reagan's going to run away with this one.
Well, I have to agree with Hunter. I mean, I think this comes down to rhetoric versus results or persuasion versus guardrails. Both of those things are important, but the bottom line is that Reagan made freedom persuasive, whereas Scalia made it durable. And so I think Scalia's impact is going to outlast Reagan's, even though I'm a big Reagan fan. So I have to go with Scalia.
Yeah, these are some of the formative people in how I was formed as in terms of my political thinking. And I mean, Reagan was the first enduring leader that I remember as a child and then grown up. And so I've always revered Reagan. I have enormous respect for Antonin Scalia because he's just a stud, one of the coolest and smartest Supreme Court justices that certainly in my lifetime that we've seen. He was, really transformational. But Reagan, I mean, I'll give him extra credit. It might not always be, we're talking about freedom in America, I think, on this. But I mean, we're talking about freedom. I mean, Ronald Reagan is, one of the most pivotal figures. He's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of leaders who helped end communism, which freed tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people really around the world, and transformed the freedom landscape for the entire world. And for that, I kind of definitely give him at least some extra. It might be out of bounds of what we're talking about right now, but I mean, that definitely ending the threat of national communism and in the battle with the Soviet Union was a giant deal in world history.
I want to call out something Jeremiah did because it was really, really slick. He decided to agree with Hunter and side with Scalia. And Hunter, I don't think you voted for Scalia.
No, I was wondering about that. I think that went right over my head.
No, you don't get it off that easy, sir.
I totally missed it. All right, well, Reagan's moving on. The Kipper goes forward.
David, for what it's worth, I do expect Scalia to lose the American people's vote because I think his theory is just not going to be the tangible freedom results that people want to see. Whereas I think you can really point to like specific actions that Reagan took that resulted in immediate change. Again, Scalia's is more of a long tail impact for sure.
All right. Again, another tough one. All right, now a different type of matchup. We're talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the great civil rights leader, versus our 34th president and general of World War II, President Dwight D. Eisenhower.
I'll let others start. I've started each time.
You gave us the hard one, Daniel.
I want to be their decider.
Come on, Hunter. I was going to let you go.
Oh, man. This one's hard for me. So I think this is, again, another tough matchup. You have MLK, who didn't rewrite the rules. He just reminded America what the founding fathers promised to us, and he did it in a nonviolent way. He was strategic, but not passive. And his I Have a Dream speech is one of the most iconic speeches that's most recognized everywhere around the world. Then you have Dwight D. Eisenhower. He literally took on the Nazis head on as Supreme Allied Commander. He led one of the largest invasions in history, which changed the course of World War II and probably changed the course of our human history as well. He demonstrated that liberty sometimes requires sacrifice at a large scale in order to be preserved. So this is a toss-up for me. I don't know if I can pick.
Hunter, I mean, I agree. This is a super hard one. I mean, on one side, you have the president that sent federal troops to enforce the Constitution after the Supreme Court's ruling in Little Rock. On the other side, you have MLK, who really forced us to apply our own promises in this country. It's like, how do you weigh those two things? I think I have to land on the side of MLK because he didn't just ask us to invent better principles. He actually told us we need to honor them and forced us to honor them in this country.
Yeah, it really, I think when you boil it down, President Eisenhower and General Eisenhower before that really ensured freedom for many in the world. But if we're really talking about expanding liberty to all Americans, that it's really hard to compete with Martin Luther King. And so for that reason, I have to go MLK Jr.
I think you guys are right. This is definitely a buzzer beater moment. I think Martin Luther King is running a completely different game, though. He has the moral clarity instead of brute force.
Well, I think also, Eisenhower was a great president. I think he was a very good president. I actually really appreciated about at the end of his term how he called out not, being too controlled by special interests in the defense industry and stuff. I thought that was really helpful and good words. And Brown v. Board of Education and enforcing that was huge. I think that there were other presidents like him who were good. There's really kind of one MLK. He, by his own making, stood up and became kind of, in a way, the conscience of America. And by reminding everybody, hey, this is what we're supposed to be, and kind of calling America to be that shining city on a hill for everyone, to really calling us to our true ideals, and doing it in such a way with such eloquence to really draw a lot of us to it and to kind of be enduring, really. So for that enduring legacy, I'm not voting actually, but I'll go with MLK Jr. too.
Well, we have our freedom for then.
Yeah, we do. Wow. So it's going to be George Washington versus President Abraham Lincoln, a presidential heavyweight fight, and President Ronald Reagan versus Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. All right, do you guys? So as we look ahead to those, this is getting even harder. Let's start with Washington v. Lincoln. It's the Battle of President's Day. What do you think?
I gotta go GW yet again. Look, I'm gonna keep it short. We already talked about the merits of both of these amazing men and amazing presidents. Abraham Lincoln preserved the Union. George Washington created it. There is no Union without George Washington. So my nod goes to George Washington.
I got to second that, David. I mean, none of the expansions of work that Lincoln was able to embrace and enshrine can happen if the system collapses in the first decade. And so Washington showed us that a new country doesn't need a king or a monarch or an emperor, that they can have a president who is willing to cede power. And so I think that's the biggest thing that George Washington really showed us. And so I have to double down on your vote.
That's right. I have to do the same. Not only is George Washington a number one seed, he was the number one president. And frankly, he invented the league. I think he takes this away in a landslide. And so I got to stick with George on this one.
Yeah, I agree. Without George Washington, we're still playing in like the NIT. There's no March Madness challenge here. So I agree. I've always loved George Washington. I think that the more you learn about George Washington, sometimes the more you realize what an incredible leader and president he was. So let's just say the game was close, but at the end of the day, Washington won going away. So, all right, guys, now we jump to our other matchup, President Ronald Reagan versus Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What do you think?
I got to go with Reagan on this one. He's one of my other favorite presidents outside of Jefferson. And I think we made a great case for him earlier. Not only did he make the American dream and our founding principles real again for Americans as the great communicator, he also brought liberty across the world with the fall of the Soviet Union. So I got to go with Reagan on this one.
I'm going to concur. And here's the reason why. I'm going to use your words, David. You had said in the previous matchup, MLK Jr. versus Dwight Eisenhower, that Eisenhower was a great president, but we had other great presidents, and there was only one MLK Jr. But on the flip side, I think Ronald Reagan is we're talking top 3, top 4 presidents. And in modern day history, to have been that historical of a figure, I think takes him over the edge. I go Reagan.
David, I think I gotta concur with my two other panelists here. While King's impact was enormous, he wasn't ever really forced to exercise state power himself in a crisis. And I think that's the thing that sets Reagan apart, is that through crisis after crisis, he didn't double down on government power. He doubled down on liberty.
I think that's a great point. I think what he did to transform the world's landscape was was amazing. And then you look at what he did even as president, whether it be economic and other kind of freedom restoring things were great. And then let's not forget, when he came to be power, I mean, we were in a malaise. When he came to be president, things turned, and just the mood of the nation changed a lot. And we're kind of still reaping some benefits from there. So who knows where we would have gone without his leadership. So we have President Ronald Reagan and President George Washington in the Champions of Liberty round. So there's some heavyweights there. I think they might have been roughly the same height, to be honest with you, but in real life. So, all right, guys, let's hear about President Washington or President Reagan.
So I got to go with George Washington on this one. He could have been king and said no twice. I'm sorry, but that's the original No Kings protest. And he made it so that we didn't have a monarch for the rest of history. So I think Washington takes this one away.
Look, both are great presidents, but George Washington, we haven't even mentioned this part. He actually was one of the wealthiest men in America at the time, or in the colonies at the time, and personally financed the Revolutionary War. I mean, talk about putting skin in the game. He gave it all, and we benefit as a country now 250 years later. We still benefit from that. There's no comparison. George Washington was going to run away with this thing from the very beginning. It's a bit of a letdown in terms of climax and anticipation, but it was always GW for me.
I think I got to agree with Daniel. I mean, to my last point, Washington is the president that could have been the most effective at expanding the executive branch's power, and he chose not to.
Yeah, he did set a tone for limited government, and actually, warned us against foreign entanglements. So I totally agree with you all. Hunter, I love what you had to say about the original No Kings protest. Maybe that's what we could consider the revolution. But I mean, his role as leader of the general who led the revolution and kept it together. I mean, he was a singular figure who the founding fathers and the army, everybody could rally around and draw inspiration from, and then executing that, and then taking the country forward, being its first president, setting all the great precedents that have shaped this nation. I mean, it's pretty hard to calculate how impactful President George Washington was. So I'm glad that he's going to win our challenge here.
And when you read, I mean, I think he would have had the vote of every other founding father as well. When you read about,
right.
I mean, there were factions. I mean, there were debates about what this country should look like, what our founding ideals should be, and how you manifest that in a form of government. And all of these different founding fathers actually had these spars with one another. The one person, the one figure they all coalesced around and recognized to be the leader of the country was George Washington. It was a unanimous pick. And I think they would have voted for GW as well. I got to say, by the way, I'm very pleased with this result as a George Washington University graduate. Don't judge me on that. We have never come close to sniffing a championship. But for us to have actually had a big victory in the month of March, huge win for GW. Go Refs.
That's right, Daniel. I think if the founding fathers had a bracket in 1776, George Washington definitely would have been the champion. And I'm sorry, Reagan, but if you're losing to Washington, it's nothing personal. You're just not him.
No, do you think in their 1776 bracket challenge, Washington would know like 3 months later that he won?
Like, with their quill pens.
Well, guys, I really appreciate you doing this with us. I'm so glad that Americans of Prosperity can have fun with this, but also just have something that's fun to interact with and learn from. I mean, I had to look up a few of the people. You guys, everyone, if you go to the site, to the bracket challenge, you can see. You can hover over some of the people and see who they were. And I feel like I'm a pretty good student of history. But also it's a great reminder of some of the great leaders, the principled leaders who've stood up for us and who we're standing on the shoulders of. So if folks still haven't gotten to the bracket challenge, you can go to americansforprosperity.org/one small step, and find it. Any other resources out there, Daniel or Hunter, that you'd like people to know about that they can take advantage of?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to say easier route. Go to 8250bracket.com. It'll take you straight there. Voting is still, you can still vote. You can still make your voice heard. You can share that with your friends. Have the debate that we just had. Maybe you have a different outcome, but make sure you get your vote in before the bracket challenge closes.
It's great. Well, what fun. I'm so excited about the One Small Step campaign. We've been talking about it all the time on this podcast, and it's so great to talk to, people who are doing, big things who at the beginning they never thought they could. They made transformational change. Some were elected office. We're talking to elected officials like, hey, how'd you get involved? And they have amazing stories. They have all these great things about like, hey, I was worried about my kid's education, so I stepped out, or, I saw this injustice. And, America's history is littered with those stories. And we're just going to hopefully keep encouraging people to keep taking that step and make their community, their state, and their nation a better and better place. So thanks for doing this, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Well, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.